What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review the new film Parthenope, written and directed by Paolo Sorrentino. And I'll just come out right and say it. I think it's 1/3 of a brilliant movie and 2/3 of a kind of mediocre, kind of boring movie. But that 1/3 that is worth watching is so fucking outstanding. I'm going to give a full-throated recommendation for the movie. Just go into it with modified expectations, but I should also acknowledge in advance, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of every name or phrase or title related to this movie. I've been to Italy a few times. I don't speak a word of Italian, apart from words like prego. But if I try to use an Italian accent to say things like Napoli instead of Naples, I'm just going to come across as unintentionally ridiculous, or it might be humorous for y'all, embarrassing for me. So we're going to talk about Naples as Naples, which is where this movie takes place, as well as on the island of Capri. But it's been a while since I've had a chance to tackle Sorrentino's work on this channel. For people who've been following this channel for a long time, you might remember back in the early days, I was doing weekly reviews of his show, The Young Pope. And I think that's still some of the best work of his career. I would say that I am a fan of Sorrentino, but I'm not obsessed. I've seen a lot of his work once. Very rarely do I go back and revisit his work. But what I like about Sorrentino is that he probably knows more about beautiful photography and shooting beautiful women, more so than any other director or photographer or artist alive on planet Earth at this time. And he's earned that reputation the hard way through many, many years of brilliant work. The Great Beauty from 2013 probably is still his best film, or the film that impressed me most. But obviously we have Youth from 2015, which I think 90% of the people who went to see it was just because of that hot tub scene with Michael Caine and Harvey Keitel gazing lustily at that astonishing actress. And there was this film Loro, all about Silvio Berlusconi, which was absolutely fascinating, well worth seeing. Just a wildly controversial movie about a wildly controversial figure. The New Pope, I wasn't as into The New Pope as I was into The Young Pope, but it was still a wild TV show, well worth watching. And then there was Hand of God in 2021, which I liked, very autobiographical. And I feel like with Parthenope, we are kind of in the same terrain as The Hand of God, or about that level of quality, or perhaps a little bit lower. Once again, Parthenope, the first part of it, it's such an incredible coming-of-age story, and it's so gorgeous, and it's so hauntingly beautiful, and so sad, and so erotic. It'll just absolutely cast a spell over you where you'll be wondering, how come critics are not falling in love with this movie? And then you get to the middle part, like, oh, it's because the movie just kind of dissolves and evaporates, because clearly Sorrentino, this is one of those situations where he had an amazing idea for a movie, but he did not have a great idea for the second and third act. And a movie's got to be 3 good acts and no bad acts if you want to have a good movie. But the official premise from over on IMDb is, Parthenope is a woman who bears the name of her city. Is she a siren or a myth? But that very brief description does not get the job done. The way I would describe it is, after a few summers of sunshine and bliss and romance and tragedy, she basically has to figure out, she comes to a crossroads. Do I want to be an academic and devote my life to anthropology? Or do I want to be like an exotic, beautiful eccentric and become an actress? And you basically follow her as she has these dueling adventures in those two different worlds until she finally finds her place in life. And some of those adventures in academia are at least interesting because the director Sorrentino brings back Silvio Orlando, who was just absolutely, he was the best part of The Young Pope by far. I mean, he just had me fucking screaming with laughter with each and every single episode. But he plays the professor, and he's fantastic in this, but there's just not enough meat on the bone there, whereas in the first third, there's nothing but meat on the bone, because it's all about desire and incest and, lack of ambition and despair. And she's having all these incredible conversations with her literary hero, John Cheever, played by Gary Oldman. And Gary Oldman, with like 5 minutes of screen time, is just going to absolutely knock people flat. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he gets a whole bunch of supporting actor nominations.
May I join you?
No,
Why not?
because I don't want to steal 1 minute of your youth from you.
But I must admit that I've been remiss in my duties in reading my John Cheever, because I've read one story by him ever, The Swimmer, because I like the movie The Swimmer with Burt Lancaster so much, I wanted to read the source material. I do need to read some John Cheever. I know that, at least as far as like the 50s and 60s are concerned, he is one of the great literary icons. But he has this incredible line that you'll see in the trailer, so it's not a spoiler, where he tells the young Parthenope, because she wants to spend time with him, he's like, I won't take 1 minute of your youth away from you. Or he says something along those lines in so many words. And I really think that the first third of this movie is just a movie all about youth and how some people, in spite of having the world, like the most beautiful place in front of them and all the wealth in the world, how they just completely surrender to despair and depression and, gazing at their navel. And then you have another character like Parthenope where she just loves everything. She's in love with life. She's curious about everything. And it's just got this incredibly infectious atmosphere where she wants to read everything. She wants to go everywhere. She wants to talk to everyone. And it also helps that the young Parthenope, played by Celeste Dalla Porta, she's so beautiful that all you'll want to do the entire first 45 minutes of the movie, or basically the entire movie, is just scream because she's so hot the body can't process what you are looking at. Like the eyeballs might just melt right out of their sockets, or your hair might catch on fire if you have any. And as the movie got underway and you're seeing all this astonishing slow motion photography and all these incredible Italian women walking around, basically the first 20 minutes of the movie is just nothing but guys girl watching. It's the national sport in Italy. And I was like, all right, even if this movie's not very good, I can watch 2 hours of girl watching, especially if you have Celeste Dalla Porta at the center of the movie, especially when the setting is one of the most naturally photogenic places on planet Earth. And you have all this beautiful, melancholy, haunting music kind of sprinkled throughout the film. It's just absolutely awe-inspiring as you're watching it. But I think one of the reasons the movie starts to kind of dissolve into the ether and dissipate and just kind of loses all of its forward momentum, I think Sorrentino, as he gets a little older, is perhaps getting a little bit too nostalgic about the Italy of the past. While the character is born in 1950, then there's a time jump to 1968, and we basically follow her life from 1968 up through the early 80s before yet another time jump. And obviously, Sorrentino lived through, I think he was born in 1970. He lived through a lot of this period, and he's fascinated by this period. But I feel like nostalgia, it can be dangerous. It's one thing to be interested in history. It's another thing to just kind of get lost in the past or fantasizing about the past. And I wouldn't say that as a filmmaker he's been too preoccupied with the past, because shows like The Young Pope and The New Pope are absolutely set in the present day. But this movie kind of gets lost in the past. Or maybe he just got lost gazing lustily at his actress, and it's not an exploitative movie. If you're expecting to see a bunch of sex and nudity and that sort of thing, this is not the movie for you. On the other hand, she's not dressed like a nun. She spends most of the movie in revealing dresses or bikinis and that sort of thing. So yeah, if you enjoy the female form, this movie is just an absolute masterclass in just watching a very, very beautiful woman walking around and who knows how to use her body to maximum advantage, but chooses not to because she wants to develop her brain. She wants to be an academic, but she's definitely the hottest academic that I've ever seen on the big screen. But I should add, as much as it might be kind of a creative trap falling into that kind of nostalgia for the past, it must be said that Naples, aka Napoli, becomes the most interesting character of the movie, because a lot of the movie is all about people's relationship with the city and the way they look at the city and the different aspects of it. Like basically there's a prostitute who becomes a famous actress, or there's wealthy industrialists who come from nothing, and they all are talking about their relationship with the city and what they love about it and what they hate about it. But it seems like people have a very complex relationship with that city, no matter what their strongest feelings about it might be. But because Sorrentino doesn't have enough story to keep us interested in the final 2/3 of the movie, he falls back on some old tricks where, in the absence of story, he just will kind of he'll parade a bunch of freaks and monstrosities for our viewing pleasure. And some of those scenes, while they're kind of garish and disturbing and just completely stylistically over the top, they are interesting. Like at one point, Parthenope's hanging out with an actor who's very working class, and he goes through this fusion ritual where two rival organized crime families are having basically a public betting in order to kind of seal the breach or seal the division between these two families. And it's a pretty wild, provocative, over-the-top scene. Or some of Parthenope's encounters with her acting coach as well as actresses, trying to figure out, is this a life for me? Do I have what it takes? Those actresses are total freak shows and very interesting, very entertaining. And then she has a truly wild adventure with a cardinal who, for whatever reason, he has to approve her role, like getting some job at another university. And it basically involves a lot of ancient rituals mixed with eroticism that was, once again, only Paolo Sorrentino knows how to film these sorts of things, but these are brief bursts that last 5 or 6 minutes, and it's otherwise a pretty dull hour and a half of film compared to at least the first 45 minutes. And after that first 45 minutes, there was just no way that Sorrentino was going to top that. He should have made that story the entire movie, because You have one young man who's completely, totally obsessed with Parthenope, but he's kind of permanently stuck in the friend zone, like perpetual unrequited love, just obsessed with her from at a distance. But she's willing to dance with him and hug him and have him be part of her life. Then you have her brother, who's older, who has all the opportunities in the world, but he spends most of his time just debating when or if is he going to drown himself or fall off a building. He basically just goes to parties and just like lays down in pools with like a cigarette and just gazing at the sky, not knowing what he wants to do with his life. But the sexual tension between the three of them is extraordinary, and it gets genuinely perverse at times. I mean, there's like panty sniffing or at least bikini sniffing, and there's a lot of obsession and incest and all sorts of inappropriate subject matter that Sorrentino knows how to explore to the fullest. And the movie really reaches its creative crescendo when they decide to have this weekend of hell-raising and Capri, where, of course, every single man there is dying to get into bed with Parthenope. There's this one wealthy eccentric in a helicopter who keeps inviting her to, go to his castles and go flying and all that kind of stuff. And it's just absolutely wild and insane. And after enjoying that insanity, it's hard to get totally invested in people just sitting in classrooms and reading books and that sort of thing. Like I said before, Sorrentino, he had an incredible idea for a movie, but just no follow-through, no execution. He didn't have a middle or an end.
Forse è giunto il momento che lei e usciate l'albergo.
Il mais, finiamo tutto qua.
But my biggest problem with the movie by far is that at the very end of the movie, there's a massive time jump forward where we see Parthenope toward the end of her life, coming home and kind of, getting lost in nostalgia, thinking about all of her old memories and experiences. But I feel like there's no more critical error a filmmaker can make than asking you to get invested in a new actor playing the same character when you're already tired after like 2 hours, where you're starting to get a little bored anyway. Then you suddenly say, oh, well, now for the next 15 minutes, you have to get reinvested emotionally in a new performer. Even if that actor's great, you're just asking too much of the audience. Just put a little gray in the actress's hair, put a few wrinkles, and people will accept it. Like, look at Orson Welles in Citizen Kane. He played Charles Foster Kane in his 20s through his 70s, and once again, he just used makeup and prosthetics and dye and whatever the case might be in order to create the illusion of being Charles Foster Kane. And through his performance, he obviously made it convincing and real. And I feel like Celeste Della Porta, she absolutely was totally game. She could have easily played herself in her 70s with just a little bit of makeup. But if you choose to end your 2-hour, 16-minute movie with kind of a boring, sad, melancholy, nostalgic visit to your past with an actress that's not quite as compelling nor as beautiful as the central protagonist that you've been watching for the last 2 hours, I feel like it's kind of death to your movie. And so if a movie starts strong and ends strong, audience will forgive a lot of dead weight in the middle. But I imagine that a lot of people are going to be absolutely in awe of Parthenope, at least for the first 45 minutes or so. But then they're going to wonder, what the hell happened? But as a way of wrapping up this video, let me pose 2 questions. What are the key early Sorrentino movies that I need to go back and see? I saw This Is the Place, but Sean Penn was just so fucking annoying in that movie. I couldn't really kind of surrender over to his rhythms. But his early work from like the first decade of the 2000s, I've seen none of it. And obviously, if I'm going to have a complete understanding of his career, I need to see some of his early work. But which of the 2 major Italian directors right now is the stronger? We've got Luca Guadagnino, who's on fire right now, creating a lot of work. He's not really making Italian movies anymore, but he's still an Italian director who's done very, very well. And then, of course, you have Paolo Sorrentino, who remains defiantly Italian in his filmmaking approach. I think Paolo Sorrentino has more skill and more grace and more elegance with the camera. Like I said before, there's not a better director alive on planet Earth when it comes to filming or capturing beauty for the big screen. I wish he was a little bit more prolific, but obviously if you're juggling film and television, I shouldn't complain. He's been incredibly prolific. He's just not as prolific as Luca Guadagnino. I think if I was given the choice, I was going to a desert island that said you can only take Luca Guadagnino's movies or you can only take Paolo Sorrentino's movies, I probably would take Paolo Sorrentino's movies just because I could watch those kind of the slow motion floating camera with beautiful women and incredible music like until the end of time with a big giant smile on my face, whereas Luca Guadagnino, he's a little bit more hit and miss. For every movie that's kind of wildly entertaining like Challengers, he'll then have a misfire like Queer, which just did not live up to everybody's expectations. So I think Sorrentino is the superior filmmaker right now, but I feel like every great director needs a great rival. And the fact that they're more or less kind of the same age and in their prime at the same time, I feel like it's an exciting time for Italian film. And also, Italian film needs cool new directors to get excited about, because for the last 100 years, they've had one of the richest, most astonishing and kind of legendary film cultures of any country in the world. Going all the way back to Cabiria in 1914, which is often credited as the very first big historical epic on film. And I've only seen little bits and pieces of it, so I'm embarrassed to admit I've never seen Cabiria in its entirety. Most of my knowledge about Italian film is in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, where obviously you got like the neorealists in the 40s, like Rossellini and De Sica. Then obviously you've got Fellini and Luchino Visconti. But obviously, it's the genre filmmakers of the 60s and 70s, people like Sergio Leone making these big, great operatic westerns. That is the kind of Italian cinema that I really get fired up about. But if you're interested in film history, I feel like the Italian directors from the 40s through the 70s, they can keep you busy for a very, very long time. Whether you like horror or gladiator movies or historical epics or just glamour, I mean, it was a wild time in world cinema. And I love how there's just so much goddamn variety, because if you want like full-blown horror, then of course you've got guys like Dario Argento and Mario Bava and Lucio Fulci. Or if you want like full-blown cerebral art house cinema, you got Michelangelo Antonioni. Who else is there? I'm doing a quick glance. Oh, Piero Paolo Pasolini. If you want to really just get shaken up to the core of your soul, check out Salo. It's very different from the rest of his filmography, but Salo, that was his last movie. That is well worth hunting down. In any case, this is turning into an unofficial love song to just anything and everything related to Italian cinema, which is not what I intended the video to be. It is supposed to be a review for Parthenope, and I'll just say this, yeah, check it out. If you've liked his previous work, well then obviously you're going to see Parthenope, because if you like his previous work, well then you're probably addicted and you're dying to see Parthenope. But don't be surprised if you find your attention drifting about the halfway mark. And that's all I'm going to say about Parthenope, a movie which I thoroughly enjoyed up until the point where I did not. But let me know what you think of this review down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed it, please consider liking, subscribing, hitting the notification bell. This is yet another movie from A24. So if you're an A24 fan, also definitely take it for a spin. But I can't thank you enough for watching. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.